Hello there, and welcome to the Creatives in Conversation podcast, a podcast series created by myself, visionary artist Roberto. In today's conversation, I'll be speaking with Padma Rao, an artist and project manager for the Sangini organisation.
So just to introduce myself, my name's Roberto. I'm a visionary artist. That's a title I'm trying to get used to calling myself. And I work across different mediums and that kind of thing, but I'm really interested in having conversations with people. And today I've got yourself, Padma Rao. Rao, sorry. And have looked a little bit into the work that you make. And obviously, because of the podcast theme, we're not really able to show visually a great deal unless people do watch the video. So the question I'd like to start off with, Padma, is, can you describe to us what it is that you create?
I mostly create 2D work. I'm interested in abstract contemporary drawing. Drawing is my primary discipline. And I've been drawing since my childhood, but it's one of those things, we all done it. And then as you progress, I actually came to a stage where I thought I need to deconstruct my drawing because it wasn't contemporary enough. It wasn't abstract enough. And as a result, I was literally on the verge of distorting my own skill space and almost quitting and going in the direction of painting. And then I attended a weekend workshop with Jenny Perrette. She's based in Newcastle. She's an amazing drawing artist. And I drew, and she said, why do you want to destroy something that you have? And that was the starting point, really, where I embraced what I loved. And then I began exploring in terms of how do you express yourself in a contemporary way. So it was more about the choice of materials, the ideas that you want to portray, the lines that become your vocabulary, and texture and so on. So it was less of representational, pure drawing and more of using that as my vocabulary, as my language to express my thoughts and emotions.
Wow. I'm really interested in this idea of feeling constrained a little bit by what it is that you want to do, and then this idea of what you feel that you should be doing. That's quite interesting, isn't it? Because I'm imagining that. I know from my own experience, I've had that experience to a certain degree of feeling that I need to, place my artworks or work in a particular way because of what I've seen and the idea of what it means to be an artist working in the contemporary world. So that's really interesting. Is there like a theme that goes through your work that you've noticed? Maybe even when you started drawing as a child, something that you've maybe looked back upon and sort of seen something coming through concurrently?
I mean, if you talk about childhood, I've always drawn portraits or, landscapes and anything like that. But of late, the more I kind of developed my own values and what is it that I believe in. And for me, the sense of equality for women is, central to my work. Their stories, their narratives, especially as a person, a migrant person to this country, where I found in the past, now the landscape is a little bit different, but in the past, there were very few references for me that I could draw upon. And that was the point, and it became even more important for me as to what is it that I'm drawing? What is it that I'm trying to put out there that, I want people to know about me and also that I felt that it talked about me. So in that sense, the materials, for example, I use the everyday materials that we use in India, which is kumkum. This is the vermilion powder women put on their foreheads, married women. Turmeric, which is used quite a lot in rituals and food, and it has medicinal purposes. So just kind of accessing and using these materials, which gave me a sense of connection. And at the same time, I just wanted to see, like how do I use them? How do I use these materials to talk about something that I felt deeply about? So women's issues are quite, like a running theme, and their stories, they inspire me to kind of make work. Yeah.
That's really powerful, isn't it? Because you're using like an art medium to, I guess, communicate your experiences, your perspective, and then also connecting with others as well, and not connecting with your heritage, connecting place, and then connecting things like identity, gender. These are really big themes, and there's something really powerful about developing a language, within the context that you're in, and then also connecting with others as well.
Because what we have to realize that there are still many women, especially from the communities on the margins, the diverse communities, where women are still not in the center, they're still on the periphery, and their stories are largely hidden, invisible. So we did a project in 2019 called Women's House. Here we were exploring feminism from BME and LGBTQ perspective. So we were talking to women, and when we asked the Bangladeshi women as to what feminism meant to them or women's equality, their reply was that they thought it was for somebody else. They thought it was for white women. Now that was quite telling as to how you also don't see yourself, that you deserve this sense of equality, and how you accept that unequal level playing field. So that was quite an important project, and as part of that, we created work. For me, there was also a lot of research involved in terms of who are the South Asian feminist artists out there. And again, there's some really good artists, but how many of us we know about them? Because once you don't have, these names or these faces, a generation of women could grow up thinking that this is okay. It is okay to be like this, because there are no role models to say otherwise. So this is why I think, these narratives and for me, it's a very broad theme. The moment you say women's equality, it encompasses so many things within that. And at the same time, I try to kind of focus more on women from minority ethnic backgrounds, because their stories, there's this huge gap there for women to have their own voices.
It sounds really fascinating, this idea of kind of like unearthing realizations about how people feel about themselves, especially from those communities, how people those barriers that they're experiencing that maybe they haven't been able to find the words for, and using art as a language of being able to unearth those barriers and those restrictions that are placed upon them. It's so how do you bring other women in from those communities? So would you be able to explain for people who don't know what BME means, or because there's a couple, isn't there? There's a BAME and then there's BME, isn't it? And sometimes they get used interchangeably.
And it's so political, I have to say, because I don't agree. I'm not BME, I'm not BAME, and I wasn't born as a BAME person. I am a person of Indian origin, and I'm now living here as a British South Asian woman. So these are the acronyms that we have been given for political reasons. And yeah, I don't agree with them, but in a larger, societal conversation, it's easy for others to use these terms. And that's why, because you want them to understand my language, I'm using their terminology. It's not my terminology, but it's essentially Black, Asian, minority, ethnic. So that's BAME, and it's now BAMA, and that includes refugee as well.
Okay. Yeah. You've taught me something. That's really good. So how are you bringing? Because you mentioned about bringing women in from those communities into the work that you do. So, is there an example of a project into which you've brought women in?
I can talk about the most recent project that we're doing, and it has been really, really amazing project. So for the past few months during the pandemic, we obviously discovered that within the Bangladeshi community, which has been disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19, and you can imagine women being at the front end of it, where they have to look after the family, their jobs could be at risk, and at the same time, they're losing family members. So we began working with them, and the project is called Knock Knock. It's literally knocking on women's doors. We began talking to them. Initially, their conversation, their reply was, "We're okay, we're fine." And we realized that we're not asking the right questions. So we went back again, and we didn't talk about, "Are you depressed? How are you?" We just said, why don't we just get together and as a social, and we have a chat about things. And we found an artist to do a couple of sessions. And this was Laura Conlon. She's based in Sunderland. So she did a project with the women. And that was very good. And that's how we engaged them in the conversation around, how are you? What's happening with the pandemic? And the stories began to unravel. We also invited a doctor. She's a retired lady doctor, GP, to talk about COVID-19, just general health issues in terms of mental health issues. How do you take care of self, or even kind of detect if you think you're going to be coming down with low moods or depressive kind of tendencies. So, and what happened, what we discovered was women really, leapt at it. They responded in their droves. We, immediately engaged with 45 women across Newcastle, Sunderland, and South Tyneside.
Wow.
And that told us that, my God, there's such an appetite for this.
Yeah.
And so Laura did 2 sessions. By then, we discovered that there was actually a Bangladeshi artist. Because she wasn't an English-speaking artist, there she was, hidden in the community, doing the odd workshops and whatever. And the first time she came to the session, she actually wept. And she said, "Please help me." And then one of her friends, she showed me her work to say, can you believe it? This is what she does. And because she never had the opportunity to work and show or present her work anywhere, she actually painted her walls in the house. So the friend, she with her mobile, and that time the lockdown hadn't, it was eased off. Yeah. So she was able to go in and showed me all the paintings on a wall to say, she's turned her house into a canvas, and the work is of very high quality. So then I began working with her. She attended, and I said, "How about, would you like to deliver a couple of sessions? We'll just see, it's a safe group. You're not being judged. Just see how it goes. And since then, she hasn't looked back. She's now actually the artist who was working with the Bangladeshi women. And the way she engages with them is phenomenal. It's like she's been doing YouTube videos all her life. That's how good she is in interacting with women and asking them, how are you? Tell me about yourself. So while you're doing this, keep talking, keep telling me how you are. So, and women are very comfortable. And meanwhile, she's also making her own work. So again, it's a journey that I'd like to talk about as to how sometimes, when you're on the periphery, how even your own expression can suffer. So she's producing all this work, which is more based on realism. It's about landscape from Bangladesh, beautiful, sceneries, and everything is fine. And then I showed her my work, which is abstract, contemporary, loose, based on lines, fluid. And she said, I just love it. She didn't say anything more. And then she began to draw. And you could just tell initially, her first picture was where a woman is trying to break out of many ropes that have tied her down. And she's moving forward and the ropes are kind of pulling her back. And I was like, this is very powerful. And she said, yes, this is about the woman. And all of us, we're like this. We're trying to break out. I'm like, wow, way to go. And since then, she's been sending me images of her work, very high quality. She's producing conceptual drawing now. I'm surprised how within months she's moved from where she was to now, where she's, really exploring the depth of her emotions. She actually said, a couple of days ago that I'm not able to sleep because, I'm so perturbed with these drawings that I'm making. And I had to say that you need to stop drawing because your well-being is very important. So just stop it, just take a break. But she is really, and I also told her, this is what happens to artists. That's why, we sometimes abuse ourselves. And, but how self-management is a key issue. That's also a responsibility as an artist. So we need to, I'm kind of mentoring her in that sense. It's a very informal kind of, supporting her. So we will be having that session with her. And I recently interviewed her, as part of the organization that I work with, Sangini. As a resident artist, we recorded her life story. She also is a good singer. And she's now got all the women singing, which is, again, phenomenal because these women, one of the women, she said she hasn't sang for 20 years. And after losing her brother, she thought because she's done something wrong by being happy and singing, God punished her. And since then, she never sang until recently in our session. She suddenly began singing and I was like, wow, you have a beautiful voice. And then she said, I hadn't sang for 20 years since my brother died. So this is what is happening. This is the work that, I find inspiring. And yeah.
Yeah, it really sounds like the project that you're involved with and leading is starting to enter into the realm of art therapy, and that there's some psychological work that's happening there. And it sounds like, although the process, you're right in saying that artists have a responsibility to look after their own well-being, because I guess, as you start to really dive into the creative process, it can become really deep psychological work. And to give yourself a break from that is definitely needed and definitely should be considered. But it's very powerful, the work that you're doing and what is coming out as a result. And so I guess it sounds like the work that you're making, and then the work of others, of things that I've seen on your website that you shared with me. It sounds like there's a bit of an intuitive kind of element to the work that you're doing. Like, especially when you're working through abstract, there's like an intuitive side to that. Could you talk a little bit more about the work that you see exactly?
Yes, I mean, for me, it's not that I'm trying to portray a particular scene or particular. It's more that I'm exploring a thread of emotion, and it is intuitive. It's amazing, and there's no other way to describe it, because you're mulling over this feeling, this emotion. So, to give you an example. The Rohingyas situation in Myanmar, when the first time they all left, Myanmar, and they headed towards Bangladesh as refugees in their droves, So that was a scene that really moved me. And I was very disturbed by that. And I just kept thinking, I really I need to get it out. It wasn't that I wanted to draw them walking or whatever. I just needed to get it out of my system. And I couldn't sleep. Just like Parveen said, I'm not able to sleep. I really couldn't sleep. And I just kept kind of thinking, what do I do? And whatever I did didn't feel right until I woke up one day at 5:30 and I just sat down and I began drawing, because essentially what I was trying to say, or what I was looking at, was the impact of migration and how people were losing their lives. It's the actual decimation of humanity. So all I thought about was, 5-bar gate. We use that to count. So this is a, count of 5, then 10, 15. So literally I just used 5-bar gate as an each bar, symbolizing a person. And that's, and that I drew a circle of that. And again, the choice of paper. So I used a Japanese Gampi silk paper, which is usually used for bookbinding. But it's the delicate nature of that paper was very important for me to kind of symbolize the delicacy of the situation and their lives. So,
what is 5-bar gate? Because I'm not familiar with that. What is that?
5-bar gate is essentially you draw 5 lines. I'll show you on a piece of paper. Just trying to find.
I mean, we can bring up an image. I guess that might help.
Oh yeah, I have it here. So that's what 5-bar gate is.
Okay, so it looks like, I guess, if somebody was to do a tally of 5 notes, and then they put the line going across four marks, isn't it?
Yeah, So okay. For me, that's how. For me, that was a way of not only counting but also kind of telling these are the number of people who died.
Oh, I see. And yes.
Literally, it was like a circle. It just went in a circle, and again, the circle was also symbolic of how people are caught up in the situation. So all of these different layers, and when I began drawing that, and it's just an abstract piece. People can interpret in any way they can. But for me, that was my way of actually telling that story.
That's really powerful, because it adds in the numerical part of things, doesn't it? Which is, I remember hearing about, I remember having a conversation about, when you see things on the news about this many people have immigrated from one part of the country to another, and this many people have died making that journey. And you hear these numbers and they almost you can't register these numbers until, and it seems to be people are able to register one number. They're able to focus in on one person, but people seem to have a great difficulty with thinking about, actually, if we're thinking about however many hundred or even a dozen, and we start to think of them as individual humans, and then as you say, you've got this image in your mind which you've almost had to exercise out of your mind.
Yeah.
And this process has been helpful from what it sounds like. But that numeric value, I guess, kind of adds more power, doesn't it? Because you can see it.
Yeah. And if when, I mean, I haven't presented it anywhere. I wanted to make large number of pieces, and it's a personal project, at this stage. So if ever I get to present it, then obviously that narrative, that story, would probably help people to have a sense of what's being said. Otherwise, it's just a beautiful, abstract drawing.
Yeah, and I'm really interested, I guess, what you're saying about starting with abstract and then the figurative starts coming through. So is that completely intuitive, or do you get a sense that when you started something that the theme is there and then you're trying to process that theme, or does both happen?
I think usually the theme is there. It's the theme that is unsettling, an incident or something I've heard. That's I'm not a professional artist who goes to the studio and literally sits there from 9 to 5 and makes work, because I have a day job, and a lot of my time is kind of taken up by that. So I just have to steal time, or in my daily life, as an artist, it's a need, it's an internal need to kind of make work.
Yeah. I've got to say, Padma, I completely understand that sort of complete possession that you have to make work, and nothing else will do. That, when you were talking about waking up at 5:30 in the morning and feeling that you needed to get this thing out, I've had very similar experiences, or not being able to go to sleep because there's something that needs to come through. I find that really powerful, because from what you're saying, is it sounds like you're connecting with a whole community of people, which I can't conceive myself. Like I've never felt that connection with a group of people. I'm of a Sardinian heritage, and I've got half my family in Sardinia and half my family in England, and never really feeling like I belong to either of them. Mm-hmm. But you're saying that you've seen these images and you've got these memories in your mind, and it's undoubtedly connected to you in some way, because you're feeling that you have to take this and communicate it, even if it's just for yourself. Sounds like you're trying to integrate it. Sounds like your mind's trying to process it in a way.
Yeah, I think so. I think this is the beauty of when we talk about diversity, when we talk about, having people from different places and different cultural backgrounds. When we come together, we're all bringing our own unique sensibilities, our memories, our ideas, together, or, out there. And if I didn't have that experience, that life experience, then my vocabulary would be different. I would be looking at things differently. And I think that's the layer that has become quite important for me, is to my life experience. I cannot take that away from me, as much as I've lived in this country more than half my life. And I know that I'm far more connected and rooted in this place, in this country, in this geography. But at the same time, my childhood spent in a different country, those sounds, those musics, those those that literature or that smell.
Yeah.
It will always be part of me, and they have to come through my work, because that's otherwise I would always be presenting only half of me.
Yeah, and I think there's something very powerful in those very buried memories and experiences that are there, because especially if they've been around childhood and they've shaped your mind, they've shaped the way, your identity, and then even to move from one place to another, like it, even if there was a moment where you decide, right, I'm going to leave that behind, I don't even think that's your choice to make. Yeah. I think it's connected to you, and bringing it through, I guess, enriches the community, enriches culture, because we're not becoming rigid in culture in general. Like if we're just surrounded by our own culture and we're not able to recognize and acknowledge other cultures and then integrate them within culture, then I guess we become stagnant, I'm imagining.
I mean, at the moment, my work with Bangladeshi women, so literally last week, this week on Wednesday, I met a poet, a young woman. She's written more than 100 poems in Bengali, and her poems are amazing. So, and when I listen, because I can understand Bengali, not 100%, but I would say about 70, 75%. And when she read her poetry, it was so powerful, so strong. And for me, these connections are very important, because I feel they're saying something to me, and they kind of, connect with me at an emotional level. And and that's why working with these diverse communities, I find it very, very inspiring, because I get so much from that at a personal level.
Yeah.
I also want to mention that as part of this project, we brought in a calligraphy artist, Arabic calligraphy artist. She's in Durham, and she graduated. She's an American woman. She did her master's from Sunderland University. But then again, when you talk about disconnection, that's what I've discovered, that the level of disconnection there is in the community, and the BAME community. I've seen it, I've heard it, but now working with these women closely, I experienced it firsthand. So I brought her in as well as part of this project, and she has been doing some workshops with the women. And we just received an Arts Council grant to actually do the project properly. And we're working with Sunderland Culture. So we'll have an exhibition of Islamic calligraphy art, and working with these women. Their work would also be having a platform. And I just felt that it's very important, because they're part of the landscape in Sunderland. Where is the art that they're experiencing in that at home, through either television or through their WhatsApp groups or whatever? And to have that portrayed in a mainstream gallery, that would be a real, it'll give them a sense of pride and joy to see that's our culture.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy and grateful that Sunderland Culture, they're on board. They're fully supportive of this. So the project is just started, and that'll give us the opportunity to continue this exploration. And we're looking at the idea of creativity and cultural entitlement for Muslim women. How do they define culture? How do they define creativity?
Wow, it's such a, Padma, this is such a powerful project. I feel that it sounds really introspective. It sounds very liberating, because we're kind of really addressing culture and bringing it to the fore as well. because this idea of assimilation, I've heard this idea said before about, people, it's not a viewpoint I agree with at all, about people needing, when they immigrate to a country, the need to assimilate, because I kind of think, well, what's the value of what's the value of migrating to another place if you can't bring something with you? So this idea of assimilation, I really have a disdain for, and this idea really of bringing what you've got to offer, and allowing that to influence the wider culture and society, and really encourage diversity. I'm really, obviously it's something that would be difficult to measure, but I'd love to be able to see what the ripple effect would be for such an exhibition.
Yeah. I mean, I'm also intrigued. And interested to see that we are plonking, something. And when you say Islamic, suddenly people's ideas start floating, and they have some firm views about these things. But I feel, because they haven't experienced what is Arabic calligraphy, and having worked with Ruhiya so long, it's just amazing. It's just fascinating how versatile this script is. It is an art form. And then to realize that this actually is such an ancient art form, that's, again, even more fascinating. What women said, that we read Arabic script in Quran, but we don't know how to write it, and we can't read. It's just Quran. The words that we have learned, but they can't speak it. So again, there's another facet to it. Although you know it, you know the language through the verses, in a book that you've learned, but you actually can't write it. So they're now learning, and there's a very personal meaning for them.
I was really interested in what you said there about how when you hear the word Islamic, that thoughts come to people's minds, and perhaps preconceptions and even prejudices might come to people's minds about what that means and how they understand that. I'm fascinated with this idea of exposing someone to what Islamic culture is, or Islamic creativity looks like, and slowly opening up someone's mind to the beauty that is maybe hasn't been seen by them before, because I guess if your only understanding is of what Islamic culture looks like from the television, then it could be very limited. But it's interesting to know that there is your project that's bringing out this a very ancient practice, very ancient imagery. It's seeped with language, and I was also fascinated with this idea of reading the Quran and not fully understanding it in the very basics of the word. You understand it, but you're not able to understand the whole language. So there's that it's almost like you're going through a tunnel in a way, aren't you? You're going through a tunnel that you don't go through in any other way. If you're reading the Quran, you're not going through the same tunnel as you would if you're reading something in a language you do understand.
Yeah, and this is why it's been fascinating, because we're working with women who've never participated in any art before. Never. So they may have done the odd crafts and things like that, but the kind of inquiry that they're making as part of this project and taking part in these workshops is fascinating. And that is a learning point for us as well, as artists and as facilitators, when we see. So, for example, the starting point is the women have been given Arabic names, but then they're called like pet names by their pet names. So it'll be like Dolly, or it'll be Jean, but their actual Quranic name is something different. And when we asked that, because they've always been called by their pet name. So when we made an inquiry into, do you know the meaning of their names? Many of the women didn't know. So we had to go into Google search and books and find out the meanings of that. And they did that. And then we asked, how does that make you feel? And, what emotion does it give you when suddenly you find out this is your name? And how would you portray it? And that's the journey, just using that script for them as a starting point, that they're making a much deeper kind of connection,
Yeah, I want to ask you this question, Padma. Do you meditate?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it sounds very much like self-inquiry, doesn't it? It sounds like you figured out a way of people self-inquiring without going through the meditative process, without doing a meditation. You've been able to sort of get to the same place.
Yeah. I mean, meditation, yes, I do it for my personal, reason and personal benefit. But this is indeed where, how do you take somebody into their own personal journey while I'm on the outside, and asking questions, and again, not being too intrusive. It's not about their faith, and it's not about even their being, but just kind of giving them a sense of identity. Otherwise, these conversations were probably, never had, the women never had these conversations. Why would they? There was no need. You're just having a very steady life. You're cooking, you have a family, you have children to bring up, and that's about it. But then you had to separate, your own identity from all of that milieu. It's a process. And we as facilitators, we have to be very careful as to in what process we are engaging them in, so that we retain their interest and not frighten them away.
I'm really curious to know about what are the warning signs for you? Like how I guess when you're facilitating a workshop with people and you're doing that introspective work, you mentioned about a previous person that was working with you and taking a pause and allowing them to recognize that their well-being is important. Is that kind of felt on an intuitive level as well when you're in the workshop, or do you have specific things that you look out for?
Yes, you have to be quite aware as to group dynamics, the responses that are coming forward, especially when you're working with vulnerable group women, because women who have undergone the pandemic situation where they've experienced loss of their loved ones, and also themselves, they've had COVID. So that's the context. And within that context, we are helping them to discover themselves, because the idea is that then they start valuing themselves. The idea that I'm important, and if I'm important, then I need to take care of myself. And then, of course, we bring in health professionals where they're talking about nutrition, diet, exercise. So that's like the outer side of things. But how do you take care of somebody's mental well-being? And when they're making these crafty things or talking about things, it's amazing how they're able to delve into those depths and talk about things. There's always this initial reluctance, but then it's about creating that safe environment where they are able to say that, okay, I can now talk about things that really mean something to me. So yesterday we had a calligraphy session, but it was essentially same thing, talking. And we asked this poet to read her poetry and it was about love for somebody, that yearning and so on. And that generated, we were there for 2.5 hours. And Masuma, she read one poem to begin with, and we all took turn to talk about how it connected with them, what emotions they felt, and how would they actually describe themselves in one word. So again, giving somebody that emotional language is, again, something you have to be very careful. So it's about keeping a safe environment whilst you're actually taking on the role of facilitator and an artist. Because what I'm doing, that I'm also drawing from all of that conversation, and I will be making drawings later on in response to those conversations.
I guess that's something I hadn't necessarily thought too much about until you mentioned there that I guess when you're doing these workshops and you're hearing these stories and these experiences people are having, and as they're developing their language, you're kind of absorbing that as well. So you're kind of, I guess you're then developing a visual language of your own, which is influenced by all these other people and their experiences. So what have you noticed in your own work has changed perhaps by participating in these workshops? Or even better yet, is there anything that you can define as changed from before doing these workshops, what your work looked like then, to how it's been influenced?
That's a good question. Because I began thinking, as part of the Arts Council project, I'm also making work. And I was thinking, what would I do? I mean, I love drawing. And within that, it's so versatile. I was thinking that I can explore either portraits or, the calligraphy itself, include that in my drawing. But what I've come down to, what I've narrowed it down to, is that I really want to give these women a status. And how do I do that? And then I thought that I would like to use silver point, metal point drawing as a means to do it, because it's a very, finite drawing. You really have to be precise in a sense that it's not where you can rub it off if you didn't like a particular line. So I have to be very disciplined in what I'm drawing. And by using, and I do feel that, I would like to use hopefully gold as well, to kind of, again, show that, I'm elevating these women's status. Because I do feel quite privileged in that space, although I'm the facilitator, I made it happen. But at the same time, I do feel like as an outsider, I'm privileged. I have been given that space to share with them where they're free and they're laughing and they're singing, which they don't normally do. And for that, I would like, to thank them. So these are my thoughts at the moment, that, instead of charcoal or my normal other materials, I would like to use silver point or any metal point drawing to make my work.
Wow, that's powerful. I guess there's a few elements there, isn't there? There's about the material and what that means as a material, but then there's also that process of what happens when you do a creative act such as drawing. I just thought I'd share sort of my own experience of something of when I draw. Something that I've learned is around this idea of self-criticism, and how if I'm making a mark, if I'm already criticizing the mark before I've finished that mark, then the rest of the drawing starts to become influenced by the criticism, and rather than just letting whatever comes out, come out, and accepting the little kinks and the imperfections that maybe you didn't expect. It can really be paralyzing if you're doing an artwork, especially drawing as well, where you'd make a mark and the mark is definite. It's there. You can't deny it. It's there, especially if you're using something that's can't be erased. We can't forgive ourselves with the mark is there. And it's interesting that idea of so how what's I guess the reassurances that you give for people who especially aren't creative themselves, or haven't been used to using creative processes to express themselves. Is there any pointers or anything that you maybe share with them?
Usually it's when I'm showing examples of my work. So the first question I remember first time when I showed them, just as nothing, kind of, it was just a very informal chat. And when I said I'm an artist, and they're like, oh, what kind of work you do? And of course, we're all doing, all these sessions are held via Zoom. So I had access to on my laptop, I had images, so I was able to show them. And then the questions came. So what is modern art? That was my entry point to actually engaging them in conversation about art, and the different ways of expressing a work, the tools, the materials, and so on. And that's what happened with Parveen. When I shared the work, there were questions like, what do you think first? What happens first? How do you do next? And Parveen literally took that point, and now she's making amazing work.
Wow! It's you're really catalyzing something here, and it's unbelievably exciting. I just recently watched one of the Adam Curtis's new series. I don't know if you've seen them, and there was a point that stuck out for me where he mentioned about how the importance, I guess, of communities coming together. So it was, I guess, in the context of talking about the Black Panther movement and how they see, themselves in the context of, living in New York City or somewhere like that, and then looking at other people and what they represent to them, and this idea of like what he meant. He said basically about there was a criticism around white liberals moving into black communities and then trying to help out and then building up and what Adam Curtis has said is that the criticism was that these white people are the children of colonialism and imperialism, and perhaps with the best intentions, they're actually trying to put in their own power, but by coming into these communities. And it just made me think, like, actually there is an importance around specific communities coming together and building up some momentum with them, and allowing that community to shape themselves and develop their own power and their own influence in the world. Even though for myself, I'm fascinated with what yourselves are doing, and I'd almost have an inclination to want to attend a workshop and observe. A part of me is actually saying now, it's important for me not to be there. As a person that would be identified as a white man entering my 30s, like I don't need to be there. Like those things can happen, but I definitely like to see the exhibitions. Definitely love to see what has materialized from there.
I think you raised a very important point there, because in Sangini we have worked with artists across the board, both diverse as well as non-BME, local white artists. And whilst our focus is on diversity and diverse women, this is the first time, having worked in the sector, and I worked as diversity officer in the Arts Council for a number of years, and I never set out to become a diversity person, but the sector is, just kind of pushes you in that direction. If you're Black, yes, you suddenly become a diversity specialist or equality specialist. And that's what happened with me in those days when feelings are high. And we're talking about, 90s, early 90s, when all of these conversations that I was engaging in, and you're very emotional and you're kind of feeling the inequality, and you just feel, I want to change it, I want to correct it. What do? Yeah, you become a specialist, diversity specialist, and you start talking about it. But having done all of that, now when I began working with these women, I felt this space is sacrosanct. This space is very important for them, for their well-being, for their growth. And who am I to meddle with it? It's very important. It's done on their terms, what they want, the way they want it. And I suppose it's not written anywhere. I've never told them anything like this, but it's that idea that if we want to empower them with a voice of their own, with their own cultural expression, then the space has to be very safe. The space has to, they have to feel that this is their space and they need to own it. And since then, I've discovered that even there are very few Black minority ethnic workers out there. So if I am to advertise a job, it'll be very difficult for me to find somebody skilled, suitable for that particular post. That's the other thing that I found out, that again, there are highly qualified young women, but they're not in the pathways, they're not in the route to make work or to take on jobs in the cultural sector, I'm saying. They can all go into community development and become an outreach worker. But when we talk about our cultural sector, there are very, very few women from Black minority ethnic backgrounds. So in that sense, again, it highlighted, what responsibility am I taking here? I have these young women. So, it's operating at a very, at different layers. And we're trying to help these young women and just kind of signposting them, making sure that they're doing jobs which is suited to their skills and education.
Yeah. It sounds obviously. Sorry.
It's complex. It's complex. Yeah.
It sounds like that's, I guess, the minority aspect, isn't it? That's the bit we can't get away from. Until communities grow. There's always going to be that challenge, isn't there? That there isn't as many people from those communities actually in the community. I have this question which I asked during my last conversation, which I was very interested in what came out, and I think it might be a question that I'm going to bring in each conversation. If you could just change one thing about the world, what would it be?
Well, I would, if at all, for me, it's creating that level playing field, because it's something I've experienced. I've experienced from, coming from a country where at the age of 19, I was told I can do anything I want. And I had published already a collection of poems. I was a drama artist, a radio drama artist at a national level. And I was editor of a literature magazine. I was pretty active. And then I came here, and it's almost like you become aware of your position in the society, and then you have to work your way up. It still exists. And I've noticed this, I've actually witnessed it. It's not that easy. And for me, if and inequality, not just within the cultural sector, at all levels, whether it's health, education, the world is divided between haves and have-nots.
Mm.
Yeah.
So I guess would it be fair to say that you're after a world where there's that equal playing field, and there's less disconnection. There's like an even kind of distribution towards, you know, those positions that are sought after.
One should not feel growing up because you're so and so, your chances of success is less than your counterparts. To me, you know, that's what for me is what we need to change.
Yeah.
And we can, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like your work is, I guess, sort of empowering people. It's bringing like a light inside of them that's, you know, allowing them to feel more confident about themselves, understand themselves more. And I'm imagining that the impact of those individuals, even if you never interact with them ever again, like that there's been a change there, and how they then interact with the rest of the world is, you know, we probably will never understand the impact of that. But it's so powerful, especially with communities who do feel, you know, disadvantaged and do feel that there are so many barriers for them in this world, you know, no matter where that they live. So, yeah, where can people find you if they wanted to find out more work that you do? I know you did share me a Flickr account, which I could share with the video if you'd like that.
Mm-hmm. That's my Flickr account as an artist, or the easiest is I work for Sangini, which is a women's arts organization. I'm a project manager there. So that's also another way people can reach me. And my email is padma@sangini.co.uk. It's very simple.
Brilliant. Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing what else comes from your workshops and also your own exhibitions, because, you know, I'm fascinated with how you're being influenced by everything that you're seeing along the way.
What happens, you know, that's the pressure I've put myself under now.
Yeah. Well, I hope you keep creating, because it sounds like you're doing some amazing, exciting work, and really, really helpful for people. I think, you know, even if like you don't make an exhibition, I think you're saving people in a way. You're liberating minds and souls, I think, if you want to think of it in a sort of spiritual way as well. Well, thank you very much, Padma. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and we'll keep in touch.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I really appreciate it. Thank you, Roberto.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.